The psychology of people who wake up before everyone else. It is 4:47 in the morning. The city is silent. The streets are empty. Most people are deep in sleep, dreaming about the day ahead. But somewhere in that quiet darkness, an alarm goes off. And someone, without hesitation, gets up. Not because they have to, not because a job demands it, but because something inside them pulls them out of bed before the rest of the world even opens its eyes. This is not just a habit. This is a psychological signature. And what it reveals about the human mind is far more fascinating than most people ever consider. People who consistently wake up before everyone else share a pattern that goes far beyond simple discipline. These are not people who occasionally set an early alarm for a flight or a meeting. These are individuals who rise at 4, 5, or 6 in the morning every single day, voluntarily, deliberately, and often with a strange sense of satisfaction that people who sleep in simply cannot understand. They guard those early hours with unusual intensity. They treat the silence of the morning as something almost sacred. They structure their lives around it, and they rarely feel the need to explain themselves to anyone. Psychologists who study chronobiology and personality have found something striking about habitual early risers. They consistently score higher on measures of proactive personality, a trait defined by the tendency to take initiative and create change rather than simply react to the world. But there is something deeper at work here than just productivity. Research on self-determination theory suggests that early risers are often driven by a powerful need for autonomy. The early morning represents something that no one else can touch. No emails, no demands, no social obligations. It is a window of time that belongs entirely to them. In a world where most of the day is spent responding to other people's needs, these early hours become the only truly sovereign territory in their lives. Consider a woman named Sarah, a middle school teacher from a mid-sized American city. She manages a classroom of 26 students, handles parent communications, attends staff meetings, and comes home to a family that needs her attention. By 7 in the evening, she has nothing left. But every morning, without fail, she is awake by 5. She makes coffee. She sits by the window. She reads, writes in her journal, or simply does nothing at all. When asked why she does this, her answer is quietly revealing. She says those 2 hours before anyone else wakes up are the only time during the entire day when she feels like herself. Not a teacher, not a mother, not a wife. Just a person who exists on her own terms. That feeling, psychologists would argue, is not a luxury. It is a psychological necessity. There is a concept in psychology known as ego depletion. The idea is that self-control and decision-making draw from a limited mental resource that gets consumed throughout the day. By the time most people reach the evening, that resource is nearly exhausted. Early risers instinctively understand this, not necessarily in scientific terms, but in felt experience. The morning mind is sharper, cleaner, less contaminated by the noise of the day. This is why so many of history's most productive thinkers, writers, and leaders were obsessive early risers. They were not simply disciplined. They were protecting the most cognitively valuable hours of their existence. But the psychology goes even deeper than productivity or autonomy. For many early risers, the pre-dawn hours carry a profound emotional significance. There is something about being awake while the world sleeps that creates a unique psychological state, a sense of being slightly outside of ordinary time. Psychologists who study peak experiences describe moments where individuals feel unusually clear, unusually present, and unusually alive. Many early risers report experiencing exactly this in those quiet morning hours. The stillness of the world outside seems to create a corresponding stillness inside. And in that stillness, something essential becomes visible that the noise of the day normally obscures. Walk into any gym at 5 in the morning and the psychology becomes immediately apparent. These are not people who are there because they have to be. Nobody is forcing them. There is no social pressure driving them through that door at that hour. What you see instead is a particular kind of self-possession. People who have made a private agreement with themselves and are quietly honoring it. Researchers who study intrinsic motivation note that activities chosen freely, without external reward or pressure, tend to generate the deepest sense of personal meaning. The early morning workout, the early morning writing session, the early morning walk, these are acts of pure self-determination. And that purity is psychologically nourishing in ways that externally motivated behavior simply cannot match. There is also a powerful identity dimension to early rising that rarely gets discussed. For many people, being someone who wakes up early is not just a behavior. It is a statement about who they are. Identity-based habits, as behavioral psychologists describe them, are far more durable than goal-based habits because they are tied to self-concept rather than outcomes. The person who says I am an early riser behaves differently from the person who says I am trying to wake up earlier. One is performing an identity. The other is pursuing a target. And identities, once internalized, become self-reinforcing in ways that targets never can. Consider a man named James, a freelance graphic designer in his mid-30s. For most of his 20s, he struggled with a persistent sense of creative stagnation. He had ideas, but the day always seemed to consume them before he could act on them. Client calls, administrative tasks, social obligations. By the time he sat down to do real creative work, the best of his mental energy was already gone. Then, almost accidentally, he started waking up at 5. He had no grand plan. He simply found that the early hours were quiet enough to think. Within 3 months, he had completed more meaningful personal work than in the previous 2 years combined. But what surprised him most was not the output. It was how differently he began to see himself. He stopped thinking of himself as someone who wanted to be creative and started thinking of himself as someone who was. The social psychology of early rising is equally fascinating. Early risers often develop a quiet sense of solidarity with other early risers, a kind of unspoken mutual recognition. There is a reason why phrases like the 5am Club have taken on an almost tribal quality in certain communities. People who share this particular habit tend to share other values as well: intentionality, self-discipline, a certain resistance to passivity. These shared values create a form of social identity that provides belonging and meaning in ways that are surprisingly similar to more visible community affiliations. It is also worth examining what early rising reveals about a person's relationship with time itself. Most people experience time as something that happens to them, a current they are swept along by, responding to whatever arrives. Early risers tend to experience time differently. By claiming the first hours of the day before the world makes its demands, they are asserting that time is something to be shaped rather than simply endured. Psychologists who study what is called future orientation, the degree to which a person thinks and plans ahead, consistently find that this trait correlates with greater life satisfaction, better health outcomes, and stronger sense of personal agency. Early rising may be one of the clearest behavioral expressions of future orientation that exists. And then there is the silence itself. In an age of relentless stimulation, notifications, screens, noise, information arriving from every direction at every hour, silence has become genuinely rare. The pre-dawn hours are one of the last places where silence is still naturally available. For many early risers, this silence is not just pleasant, it is restorative in a way that feels almost physical. Neuroscience research on the default mode network, the brain system active during quiet, undirected thought, suggests that this kind of mental rest is essential for creativity, emotional processing, and self-understanding. The early riser who sits quietly with their coffee before the world wakes up may be doing something far more cognitively valuable than they realize. The people who wake up before everyone else are telling us something important about human psychology. They are showing us that autonomy is not just a philosophical ideal, it is a felt, daily, bodily need. They are demonstrating that identity is built not in grand gestures, but in small, repeated, private choices. They are reminding us that silence is not emptiness. It is the condition in which the most essential parts of ourselves become audible. Next time you see someone who seems inexplicably energized at an hour when most people are still asleep, remember there is a psychological story behind that wakefulness. A story about sovereignty, identity, and the quiet but powerful human need to own at least a few hours of the day before the world comes to claim the rest.